Okay, Boker Tov. So we're on the fifth parak, and we pick up at the bottom of Mem Vav Amud Bet. We have moved beyond the fourth parak, focused a lot on Shor Tam and Shor Muad, and now we're dealing with some more general issues that relate to the goring oxen and other cases, as we'll see in the upcoming Mishnah. And the big case of the first Mishnah is the case of Safek, of a doubt. You don't know whether the cow was gored when it was pregnant or not. So does the owner have to pay for it? So the position of the Mishnah of Sumch is you split it. You split the payment for the fetus, which might have been gored by the ox or not. And the Chachamim would say, now we're dealing with the second part of the Mishnah, which is less clear, which is that the cow gored, and you don't know if the cow was pregnant or not. And it says also the similar idea of split. You say you pay half damages from the cow and half from the fetus. You don't know if the fetus was part of the goring cow or not. But of course, and you pay a quarter of the fetus. That does not seem to make sense. It sounds like 3/4 damages. So Rabbi basically says the issue is that the fetus is owned by a different person, and therefore you don't know So you take half of what you should have been paid, half of the half damages. If the full damages were 200, you owed 100. You get half of that from the goring ox, because that ox was or goring cow. That cow was definitely one of the guilty parties, one of the perpetrators. And the question is do you collect your other half? If you knew for sure that the fetus was part of it, you'd collect your other half from the fetus. Because you don't know for sure, you split it and get half of the half. Okay, that was the position of Abaye. And along the way, we pointed out two things that Tosa says. Number one is that even if the fetus was part of the cow, it shouldn't really be divided half and half. The fetus was only a small part of the sort of animal that did the damage. Tosa says, speaking about half is just speaking like it's a representative number. What it really means is whatever the proportional amount would be, that's the responsibility of the fetus. And since you don't know, you only get half of that. And the other interesting thing was that you don't say that, look, yes, maybe even if they both did do it, if one of them isn't around to collect from, maybe I should be able to collect the balance from the other. And according to this, no, you only get let's say it's a 90-10 split. If you can't get your 10% out of the fetus, then you cannot get more than your 90% out of the cow. And that's something we're going to see later when there are multiple participants in damage. Is it like a 50-50 split, or is it 100-100? How do you exactly imagine how to divide the responsibility? Okay, now the Gemara picks up at the bottom of Mem Vav Amud Bet. Amar Rava. So Rava says, Atu, Echad me'arba b'nezek v'echad mishmar b'nezek ktani. Rabbi, you said when the Mishnah said a half and a quarter, it meant the half of what you would be liable, which is really a quarter of the total. And when it said a quarter, it meant a quarter of what you should be liable, a quarter of the half, which means an eighth of the total. But that's not what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah didn't say a quarter and an eighth. The Mishnah said a half and a quarter. So Chatzi nezek revi'ah nezek ktani. Ela marav. So what's pshat in the Mishnah, which says you got half from the cow and a quarter from the fetus, which also means a half and a quarter of the full damages. So olam b'parav v'vlad dechad. Okay, we don't. The cow and the fetus is owned by the same person. So what's the issue? Just collect everything from the cow. Here's what we're saying. Isa lepara. If the cow is around and you can't find the fetus, or the fetus is worth nothing, you can get your full half damages from the cow. These are both owned by the same person. You know that the cow was the mazik. You don't know if the fetus was the mazik. So therefore, you are entitled, when it says a half and a quarter, it doesn't mean at the same time. It means if you have only one of these animals to collect from, you're entitled, it's a very simple read of the Mishnah, you're entitled to collect your full half damages from the cow. The cow is definitely the mazik. You don't know if it also had the fetus or not. So all you have in front of you is the cow. You're entitled to collect your full half damages from the cow. Of course, why not? Okay, less than the part. However, if the cow is not in front of you, okay, it died, it's worth nothing, it ran away, whatever it is, and the only thing you have to collect from is the fetus, so then if you knew the fetus did it, you could collect your full half damages from it. But since you don't know the fetus did it, you can only collect half of the half, you can only collect a quarter. So that's a very clean read of the Mishnah. It doesn't mean a half and a quarter at the same time. It means you're entitled to a half from the cow if you can get it from the cow. If the cow isn't around, you're only entitled to a quarter from the fetus because you don't know if the fetus was involved or not. And therefore we say split it. It's Sumchus who says split it. Okay, so now the Gemara clarifies. Taima, the reason that we say this division is the lo yadinan ihave vlad behada kinakha ilo. if the fetus was together with the cow and the cow gourd or not. Aval, it was obvious that the fetus was together when it gored. You would be entitled to get all of it from the fetus. Okay, why not? It was part of the goring animal. Why shouldn't you? So the Gemara just said, well, let's take a look. So Rava L'Tameh, so that idea that if you know the flood was part of it, you could collect your full damages or your full half damages from the fetus. Rava's going according to his reasoning. The Amar Rava, Parashihizika Gova Miflada. If a pregnant cow gored, you can collect the whole damages from the fetus if there's enough to collect from. So that's the same idea here. If you knew the fetus was part of it, you could collect fully from the fetus. Because you don't, and you only have the fetus in front of you, you collect half. Now, my timer, what's the reason? Gufahi. It's all part of the same body. Basically, Tosfos discusses what the Gemara is really looking for. The word it seems the Gemara is looking for is uber yerech imo, or not. That is, the fetus considered to be a limb of the mother. So Tosfos discusses why it doesn't say that, because Tosfos basically says when do you say uber yerech imo or not? And they're like, it depends on the circumstances. So Tosfos sort of discusses that. If we have a minute, we'll look at Tosfos. But I want to just point out something before you get to like why could it use a different phrasing, which is more common, is what's the alternative here? Let's say you did not say that it was Gufi. Let's say you said the flood was some other entity, okay? So what would be the halacha? Let's say I had two cows, two oxen, doesn't matter, that gored a cow, okay? We discussed this yesterday.
But we had a case already.
All right. And you didn't tap, and it caused $100 of damage. Each ox was worth $100. And you didn't have ox number one around, okay? Could you collect your full $100 from ox number two? If they were both owned by the same person, right? Would you say that, each ox, you're only entitled to $50 from each ox, right? Because Tom is Chatzi Nezek Miguf or whatever, there were two gorings? Or would you basically say, like, no, especially if, it's sort of like the question we asked yesterday, right? Maybe I'm entitled to one. If I can't get from one, I get from the other. So yesterday, it sounded like yesterday we said that it was the first thing. That if they were really of two separate people, right, you would have to divide. I could get $50 from Reuven, $50 from Shimon. If Shimon's oxen's drowned, I can't go and collect the rest from Reuven. But you really divide it equally. Here we're saying, what if they actually both belong to Reuven? Okay, but one of the oxen wasn't around. I say, look, Reuven, you owe me $100, right? Rather than collecting 50 from this ox and 50 from this, I'm going to collect the whole 100 from that. So it sounds like the Gemara would say, even that case, you can't say. If they were both involved, then you only collect proportionally from each one, and if one isn't around, you can't collect from the other. And that's why the Gemara says, according to Rava, the idea that if the mother wasn't around, you could collect all of it from the fetus shows we don't consider them as two separate oxen. Because if we consider them as two separate oxen, then if the mother wasn't around, you couldn't collect the rest from the fetus. You could only collect the proportional amount from the fetus. But if it's all one ox, okay, then if it's all one ox that gores and half it dies and half of it gets taken away, I can still collect the rest from the other half. Okay, so the Gemara says because Rava is saying you have the right to collect everything from the fetus if the fetus was a part of it, that shows we consider it to be one body. So the Gemara now has taken what it was assuming yesterday and it's gone one step further, which is two oxen gore. If it's owned by two people, I can't say, hey, I can't find Reuven, I'm going to get all of it from you, Shimon. Even if it's owned by one person, I can't say, I can't collect all from one ox, I think one ox isn't around, I'm going to collect all of it from the other ox. You have to divide it equally. And the only reason here you're entitled to collect all of it from the fetus is because we view it all as one animal, and therefore you're just collecting from different parts of the animal. Okay, so it's interesting that Kamma makes those assumptions that, about when you would be entitled to go to the other ox, and it says basically you wouldn't if they were really separate oxen. Okay, yes.
I thought this is a Mishnah we had, so.
Yeah. But the question is, how do you interpret the Mishnah? Based on this interpretation, that's what emerges. Okay, maybe there are other interpretations. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Okay. Trying to go now. The Gemara says like this: Amarava, Parashizika Gova Mifla, my time Akufahi. So it's all one thing, and therefore, if you can't collect from part, you can collect the full amount from the rest. Tarnagolas shihizika, let's say a chicken damage. I mean, it didn't say gored, but whatever it did, okay? And it would have to be a case of a Karen, I guess, because it's talking about the body of the chicken. But it intentionally went ahead and pecked away at some pane glass window and broke it or something, okay? Eina gova mi beit tzata. Okay, you can't collect from the egg of the that was in the chicken when it gored. That would be the parallel of the fetus. My taima, pir sheba alma. It is only like refuse, meaning it is not considered part of the body. It's something that's in the body, but it's not considered a part of the body. Now that's actually interesting because there's other places in which we consider it to be part of the body. Like if the animal's a treifa, the egg also is considered a treifa as opposed to kind of distinct from the animal. So Tosa says it depends on its degree of development. While it's developing in the mother, then it is in the hen. It is considered to be part of the hen, and if the mother becomes a treifa, the egg does. But after it's fully developed and it's just waiting to be laid, right? Then it would be considered to be separate from the mother. And obviously, in this case, presumably, you don't consider the egg to be a mazik. I mean, it's actually an interesting question. Why don't we say that we collect proportionally from the egg? Okay, we don't collect the full amount from the egg, but let's say you have two mazikim here, a hen and the egg. So presumably, if it's not a live being, it is interesting, right? That before we saw that you could consider the fetus to be like a separate mazik. But nobody is saying that you consider, once the egg is not part of the mother, you don't consider the egg to be a separate mazik. So presumably because it's not live, but the fetus could have been a miscarriage, could have been more dead. I don't fully,
It's ironic because it's less of a separate thing from the body than a fetus is, right? In that, like, it's not its own entity until it's been fertilized and hatched and whatever, right? Like a fetus, you can like look in there and it's two things, and it has its own whatever control over it. But an egg is like actually, I don't know, you wouldn't say a woman's egg.
You're saying because a fetus is alive. I was saying because a fetus is alive, that's why the Gemara was more willing to consider it to be an independent mazik. But you're saying that's also why it has a little more independence from the mother.
Right.
But once the egg is formed and has the shell on it and hasn't been laid yet, that's the stage at which Tosos is saying.
Although how are you going to tell what stage?
Right. So Tosos says, well, maybe it hasn't been formed yet, but then it just becomes a motzmi chaver lavaraya. Like I'm trying to say, it wasn't yet formed, and I have a right to collect from it. And you're saying, prove that to me. I say it was.
Go back in time and take a
picture. Well, maybe it depends how many days later it got laid. Okay. The Rav, and the Rav also says, in shamin lepara. Now, okay, so that's like pretty much ends our discussion about the goring cow. And again, very interesting in this question of number one, it's like an uber yarch imo. Number two, when there are two entities that gore, how much is it divided? How much is it that if you can't, the Gemara's presumption that if you can't collect from one, you can't collect the balance. I mean, each one is only liable for their portion of it. So therefore, if this was two entities, you could not collect everything from the vlad. Okay, now the Gemara goes on to a different point. Rav also says, "Ein shamin lepar bifnei atzma levlad bifnei atzma. El shamin levlad al gabi para." Now, this is something that we haven't really discussed yet, but it also is relevant to the earlier discussion about Dmei Vlados, when a woman is hit and she miscarries, and we'll have to go ahead and revisit this when we see that. But if now this cow was gored, and it was gored by this ox, there's no question what happened. I mean, it's similar to the Mishnah, but here everything that happened, and you want to figure out how much do I owe for the loss of the fetus, because it gored this cow and it made it miscarry. So Rabbi says you don't go ahead and assess, well, how much would you pay for like a fetus that was about to be born in 2 weeks? Okay, what you do is you say, no, you look at how much would you pay for a pregnant cow and how much is it now you've got a dead cow. It's dead with its fetus being dead. Okay, and because you're sort of considering it together with the cow, you're not going to wind up paying as much. Okay, you basically look at it as that the object that was gored was the cow. The cord was gouged, and an 8.5-month-old fetus was gored. A cow was gored, an 8.5-month-old fetus was gored. How much is a cow worth? How much is an 8.5-month-old fetus? You say a pregnant cow was gored, right? And therefore, that's going to, just the way the market works is that's going to become to a lesser total than if you assessed each one individually. Okay, any shamin lepar bifnei atzma v'vlad bifnei atzma, ela shamin levlad al gav para. If you don't say that, the mazik loses out too much. Now, of course, the question is, poor mazik. Yeah. So the point is, the point is not just that he pays more, but he pays more. It's unfair that he pays more. That fundamentally he gored a pregnant cow, so you should assess the value of a pregnant cow. You shouldn't assess the components separately. Okay, which is sort of like how like you say like whenever you do any home improvements, like you never and then you sell the home or sell the private, like you only get back a small portion of the actual money you put in, right? Once it actually, different parts of your house you get a bigger portion of how much money you put in, but once it's part of a larger package, you don't fully realize the individual cost of each thing. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. Okay. Okay, all right. So this is you cut off the slave, the arm of a slave. Okay, now what would be the alternative? Of course, you're paying for how much is a whole slave worth and a slave without an arm worth. Like, what do you mean? You assess the value of the arm by itself? How would you even do that if you wanted to do that? So Rashi says, well, what you would do is you would actually, the alternative is, Rashi says, like you would say to somebody like, okay, how much would you let me pay you to give you the right to chop off your slave's hand? That would be assessing the value of the arm by itself. Because obviously somebody would make a very high price that they really would resist that. But once you're already, I don't know. Anyway, it's obviously any of these laws are always deeply problematic because of the way it commodifies, a human being here. But besides which, it's like harder to imagine how you even talk about a market price of a hand by itself. Okay, and this actually is something we actually had, if you remember, by Shane, where it says, right? If an animal goes ahead and goes into a field and eats some of the whatever, the vegetation or the grain or whatever, you say, okay, it destroyed like an acre of it destroyed, I don't know, a pound of a wheat. How much is a pound of wheat worth? And you say, no. How much was the field worth before? And how much is the field worth now? What do you look at as the object that was damaged? Do you look at it as as the wheat, or do you look at it, the larger object here is the field? All right. And presumably, now again, what's the basis for this is not being spelled out. Let's take a look. So that's what the Gemara is about to ask. If this is the right law, that you should say actually 1 minute, it killed a fetus. How much is the fetus worth? So lichush mazik, let the mazik lose out. What's the logic? I mean, don't just tell me, the other way is more. The mazik pays more. Okay, but why do you choose one over the other? So mishum da amarle parama abarta aziktach, parama abarta shimanalach. Because the mazik could say, look, I destroyed or I damaged a pregnant cow. Assess for me a pregnant cow. Okay, which basically means that makes sense, right? It's basically the thing that was damaged was the cow. Now, when you have a pregnant cow and something happens, and in this case, whatever, you obviously there look at the fetus as part of the cow, and you look at the damaged thing as the cow. The interesting thing is by the field. But presumably it's the same thing. Even if you're going to harvest and you're going to get all this money from the field, right now you look at it as a field that's ready to be harvested. You don't look at it as I got some ground here and I got some grain here, and you destroyed the grain. No, you destroyed, my field that was with this grain, and now it's a different type of a field. So, yes.
Except you could be saying, I was about to take that grain to the market and sell it, and now I'm out.
Right, so there is an interesting question, which is when would we say like kol ha'omed, lekatzer kikatzer dami, and like it was ready to be harvested, then at that stage you might not look at it as part of the field. There is a stage when it gets to be that way. That's correct. Okay, so the Gemara says now this: Pshita paradechad vladechad pitma lebal para. Now let's say you go ahead and you have to pay off your ox brought a pregnant cow. You have to pay the person, but the fetus was owned by somebody else. So you have to determine how to assess, how to pay each person for their portion. Okay. There we talked about how to assess the total damage, but now we're talking about how to divide it between which portion of this pregnant cow is worth $1,000. Okay. And how much of that $1,000 goes to the owner of the fetus? Now, what you should have just said is, well, how much would have been without the fetus? Without the fetus, would have been worth $800, so $200 goes to the fetus. I know. So let's read what the Gemara says. Okay. So, okay. Pshita paradechad ufladechad pitma lebal para. The fattiness is to the owner of the para. So let's look at what Rashi says. This means pitma. Rashi says, "Mash shamno so shai say yafem miknei shumna havidabal para davlad machmasa lo asi shumna." So Rashi says, if you've got this cow that's now, because it's pregnant, it's fatty. It actually has put on weight. So you don't say, well, put on weight because it's eating for two. It doesn't matter. Like right now, nevertheless, that weight is the weight of the mother. It's not the weight of the fetus. So that extra value that it has because of its additional weight. But if you imagine it, meaning the point is you have to imagine how much would this be worth without the fetus? But what are you imagining without the fetus? If it was without the fetus and it was its pre-pregnancy weight, okay, or without its fetus and it's with its current weight. So that's saying, well, without the fetus with its current weight, because the weight is still on the para. It's not the weight of the fetus. So you don't imagine how much it was worth before it was pregnant. You imagine how much it would be worth without the fetus with the current weight.
How do you know that?
It's because it's like different than people trying to lose their weight after they got
any
pregnant.
mother who's recently given birth will tell you that the weight is definitely
Because of the
so
fetus.
not-
Right, but the reason is that the mother ate more because of the fetus, but now the weight is on the cow.
Right.
Okay,
So then how do you assess that?
I don't know. So you imagine what would it be worth minus the fetus with its current weight. You go in and you ask people who are in the market, what would you pay for it with this weight without the fetus? Okay, Ravacha now. Nafchamai. How about the fact though that it looks bigger? Okay, its volume. So it's actually not its weight, but people pay more for something that looks bigger. Okay, so that presumably is because of the fetus that it looks bigger, even though it's actually not the value, the direct value of the fetus. It's an appearance of the cow. So Rav Papa Amar Lebal Para. So for the fact that it looks like a big cow, right? You would imagine how much would it be worth with not only this weight, but this volume if it wasn't carrying the fetus. Okay, and therefore that's the amount that you pay the owner of the cow. Ravacha Brei Ravika Amar Chokin. No, you split it because that additional volume is also seen as attributed to the fetus. So the owner of the fetus gets whatever the increase in price is due to that, or at least partly. The Chokin is you split it. Okay, I mean, if people know what they're doing, why would you pay for volume if it didn't actually imply weight? I don't know, but okay.
Well, it's not always possible to weigh a cow.
Well, that's true.
A pretty big scale.
Right, that's
Also
true.
marketing. I mean,
What?
marketing. We're seeing
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. So that was the end of the pregnant cow. All right.
It's
Now-
true. It was a pregnant cow.
Well, that's a good point. Next Mishnah. Okay. Now we make a significant shift. It's always so funny, like how sometimes the Mishnah is like, it belongs to the previous parak. I mean, it was a new idea, but it was still goring cows, this first Mishnah, this parak. And now we're on to something that we're going beyond the goring cows. We're getting back to more general issues. Let's take a look. Hakadar, so a potter who brought his pots into the domain, into the yard of the Balabayas. The owner didn't say you can come in. This guy was a door-to-door salesman, and he just walked in without permission of the owner and with all of his pots. And the owner of the Balabayas, the cow of the owner, of the house owner, went in and broke it. It's basically like a type of a regel. Potter, he's exempt. This guy is still over Rishus. Basically we learned that any damage that occurs in the Rishus of the Mazik, you're exempt. Whoever gave you permission to be here, I have no liability for if you're on my property without permission, so I'm exempt. Okay. Anyway, it's regel, and regel is only chayiv and chatzor hanizak. Certainly, it's going to be pater and rishus hamazik. All right. Now, pater. If, let's say, my animal slipped on your pots that were in my property without permission, you're liable. Presumably, that's a type of a boar, right? You leave your pot, my animal slips on it. We had a debate before to these boars, sure, whatever it is. But anyway, you made your boar, you have your shore in a place where you don't have rights, so my animal slips on it, you're liable. Okay. Now, if I say, sure, you can come in and bring in your pots, I'd like to see what you have for selling. So then, then if my animal steps on them, I am chayiv. Now, here we're going to pause for a moment, and let me ask you, why am I chayiv? I said, sure, come on in, bring your pots, and you bring in your pot, my animal trambles on them, I'm chayiv. So why am I chayiv? What do you think? The most obvious thing is to say is it would be regel. I'm chayiv because my animal breaks your pots. Okay, but a regel is only chayiv. Where's a regel chayiv? Bershut ha-rabim, it's pater. It's chayiv bershut ha-nizak. So all of a sudden, because I let you bring your pots into my yard, it's considered your yard. It's bershut ha-nizak, right? It's sort of like most. It's both of our yards. Why am I chayiv for regel? So it's not so. Maybe it is. Maybe that makes it bershut ha-nizak. I let you put it down. Well, you put it down in my house. It's like your rishus, but that's a little strange. Regel is only chayiv and bershut ha-nizak. So what the Gemara is going to say is, not to ruin the surprise, what the Gemara is going to say is, when I say, sure, you can come in, then I am implicitly taking responsibility for anything that happens to your things. Okay, when I'm actually, it's actually like, it's actually like even higher liability. I'm letting you come into my domain. It's my yard. So I'm basically saying I am taking responsibility now for things that will happen to your objects if I'm
This
allowing
is
you
like
to
your
come in.
insurance policy now to cover him.
Exactly. So it's not clear in the Mishnah. You could have said rega, but rega's a little strange. It sounds like once I give you permission, I am now accepting responsibility.
They can always stipulate,
Yeah.
come in,
Right.
whatever happens.
You could always stipulate. Correct.
Like the guy who made his part of his yard Rashida Rabin, but like we say he can stipulate that he's not actually responsible for damage.
Right, you mean when he like gave the edge of his yard to the
Yeah.
Rabbi? Right. I mean, here you could definitely stipulate, but it sounds like the stam is you're accepting liability. Okay. Now, similarly, this next case is going to be almost example of the same, except it's going to go basically this Mishnah. Now that we've done Shane, Regel, and Karen, this Mishnah is a little Shane, Regel, and a Karen Mishnah. So Hichnis Peirosav L'chatzav Balabayis. Now you brought your fruit into the house, into the guy's yard. Shalom Brishos without permission. Bachaltam Behem to Shalom Balabayis, and he ate it. Potter, he's exempt. He ate the owner because it's like a Bishop Hamazik who gave you permission to be here. Okay, V'Huska Behen Balapeirat Chayev, and if it slipped on it, so it's a type of a boar, you're liable. You brought your fruit here without permission. I gave you permission, then my animal ate it. That's a shame. Okay, then I'm chayiv. Okay, so again, we went from regel to shame, but again, it's not reshut hanizak, so presumably I'm chayiv because I implicitly accepted liability. Now we're going to go to Karen. Okay, I allowed you bring your ox into my domain, shalom brishos, without permission. Now my ox gores your ox. Okay, or my dog bites it, okay, which is similar. Okay, patur, I'm exempt. Okay, that's a case of Karen. Okay, but even though Karen doesn't matter the domain, if you're in my domain, Rishut Hamazik, then it's Shur Chaber Shusi Mabai. You have no permission to be here. I'm not liable for anything that happens. Okay. Nagahu Sharosh Shalabalayis. If your ox gores my ox, Chayev, you're obviously Chayev, right? You know, it's a Karen, of course you're Chayev, and it's in my domain. Nafal lebora, let's say your ox falls into my well. Hivish meimav, and it ruins the water of my well because I now got behema cow stink in my well. Okay, chayav, you're chayav. Now that would probably be like a type of a regel or something like that. But anyway, again, it doesn't matter. You're in my domain. You're chayav for what you do. Okay. Now, haya avivo b'no l'tocho, if the house owner's father or son was deep in the well, mishal masakofer, and it kills them and it falls and it pays kofar. Now the problem is going to be kofar is only by muad. Why is it paying kofar? Okay, maybe this is interesting. According to the position that a tam, remember the position that a tam pays full damages when it's in the chatzar hamazik, chatzar hanizak. Excuse me. So would you pay full? Would you pay kofar if you're a tam in chatzar hanizak? Right? Remember the position that when your animal goes in and does a goring, if it's actually in the other person's domain, it actually is full, not half. Anyway, this is going to be a question. Why do you pay kofar?
Well, two questions here.
Let's finish the Mishnah. In Hichnis Birishus, but I allowed you to bring your animal in, then Balachatzer Chayev, and then my animal gores yours. So I'm Chayev. That's like the obvious case, because then it's a Karen. Of course, Karen is Chayev. Once you lose the fact that you're Shalom Birishus, my animal gores yours, and you have a right to be here. Of course, I'm going to be Chayev. Rabbi Omer, Bekulan, in all these cases, so this makes it clear, seems to make it clear why, according to the Tana Kamma, you were chayiv. All these cases where you say the homeowner is chayiv when he gave the guy permission, and then the pots or the fruit got damaged, Rabbi says it's not true. The homeowner isn't chayiv unless he explicitly says, "Come on in, and I'll protect your objects. I'll take responsibility for your objects." But if he didn't explicitly articulate that he would accept responsibility, then even if you give a guy permission, your animal tramples on it, eats it, or whatever, you're exempt. It's Shane and Regel, and it's not in Rishon HaNizak, and you're exempt. Presumably, you'd still be chayav by Karen, although since Rabbi is going on the last case, it sounds like not, but that's a little hard to understand why you wouldn't be chayav by Karen, yes.
So I'm just wondering about the Aviv Rabbeinu. So we're assuming that the reason why that would be is because Aviv just has a blanket permission to come into your chutzner whenever you want?
No. My Aviv were there because they live in my property. That wasn't that they're strangers. Anyway, it wouldn't matter.
No, but let's say fine. No, but let's say it was you that went into my property. You're not my father, my son, and then
Aviv were in the well.
No, I understand that. I'm trying to understand why it's Aviv Rabbeinu.
It's not dafka. It was just a standard case.
Oh, meaning, let's say it was a third party there
who didn't have right to be there. Would you still be chayav and kofar?
Right.
Yeah, presumably. I mean, we'll see. I mean, we have to figure out why you're having kofar, but presumably the only reason time you would be Putter is well. The question is, would you ever be putter in kofar? Even if I gave you the right to be in my property, right? Why would that like you have a right to be in Rosh Hashanah? Kevin is always going to be chayav. So it's not so clear in the end of the chiyuv of kofar is only because you don't have permission. It might be even if you do have permission. We'll have to see about that. Okay, the case of Avi Pino presumably is just like a common sense.
I mean, it could be anybody because how you
Exactly. It's just
Even if you just
right.
broke into my yard.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see about it, but yes. Okay, let's take a look now at the Gemara. Do you have a question, Jenna?
I'm just wondering why we're not asking why he put his father at the bottom of the well.
It was a little Yosef and the brothers scenario. No, I don't know. They were going. Maybe it was a well that I was storing things in. Not it was a pit, not a well, and he was going down to right.
And are we gonna ask why you don't just say if it's the who is it? Who's the guy at the end? Like why
Rabbi?
we're not what?
Rabbi?
Yeah, why wouldn't we just say it's a shomer then? Why are we going through this whole thing of bringing into Chutzner with permission or not?
What do you mean? Rabbi is saying no, because what Rabbi is presumably saying is that the reason Kamma says once you give permission, you're liable for damages that occur to your guest's property, because that's implicit accepting of responsibility. And Rabbi is saying, I don't agree with this implicit accepting. Okay, so the Gemara says like this: Taima to Shalom Bereshus. The reason that you're liable, the Gemara is focusing on why you, the guest, are liable if the owner's animal gets damaged. It's because you didn't have permission. But if you were given permission, so let's say I gave permission for the guy to bring in his pots. The mission never spelled this out about what happens. But the mission says once he has permission, I'm liable if his pots get damaged. It never said once he has permission and my animal slips on his pots, is he liable? Presumably he's not. It says he came in without permission and my animal got hurt on his pots, he is liable. Presumably if he has permission and he brought in his pots, my animal slipped, he's not liable. Okay? So the Gemara says, okay, just Habir Shut, if he had permission, he would not be liable if my animal got damaged. The law, and we would not say that just because you gave your guest permission, okay, why don't we say, well, if you gave him permission, he implicitly is accepting liability. You're being so nice, right, to let me come into your yard. Maybe that should be an implicit accepting of liability on my part for any damage that might occur to you because you've allowed me or my stuff in your yard. We don't say that, right? So let's figure this out, right? The guy brought in his pot without permission. Your animal slipped and hurt itself on it. Basically, he's chayv because it's a boar. He made a boar shalom bereshus. You give him permission. He put down his pots. Presumably, he made a boar bereshus. Like if he had a right to put his stuff there, and your animal got tripped, right? So presumably, he's not liable just because he's not liable for a boar in that case. But the Gemara is saying, but 1 minute, fine, you're not liable for a boar. But why don't you say, look, the guy was nice enough to let you come in and to put your pots down or whatever. Maybe you are implicitly having to accept any responsibility if something would happen as a result of you bringing your pots in. We don't say that, okay? So now the Gemara is going to continue. It says like this. Mani, Rebbe. So this is Rebbe who's saying we don't interpret any implicit accepting of responsibility. The same way we don't assume that the homeowner implicitly accepts responsibility, we don't assume that the guest implicitly accepts responsibility. So you let me be a guest, fine. If I'm not going to be more, accept any particular responsibility, the damage that occurs to you. And if your animal slips on my pot, it's not my problem. Okay, so we don't say interpret any implicit accepting of responsibility. Ema Sefer, let's keep on reading. In Hirni Spirit Shut, if you gave the guy permission to bring his stuff in and his stuff got damaged, so Baal Chatzar Chayev. So the owner of the household, the homeowner, is liable for responsibility to the damaged pots. So why is that, right? It would be a shein and regel. So why is he chayev? Just because he let the guy bring his pots in. So what do we say? Asan l'Rabbanan. It goes like the rabbis. Like when you give somebody permission to come in, you are implicitly accepting responsibility. So basically, I mean, you can yourself figure out the answer. The Gemara says like this. If I give you permission to come in and my animal tramples on your stuff and damages it, it's not shein and regel because it's not chatzar and nizak, but I am liable because I implicitly have accepted liability when I allow you to come in and be my guest. So why, when my animal gets hurt on your thing and I gave you permission, haven't you implicitly accepted liability for when my stuff gets damaged? If when I let you come and bring your stuff in, I'm implicitly accepting liability for your stuff being damaged, why don't we say the reverse? If my animal gets hurt on your stuff, you've implicitly accepted responsibility for me. So what do you think the difference would be? You see a difference?
It just doesn't make sense to say that. I mean, like, it's one thing. You're coming into my property at the end of the day.
Right. So basically the logic is, if I have invited you in as a guest, in my position of being like the homeowner, right, it means like I'm in the position of the responsible party here. This is my domain, my property. If I've welcomed you in, then that's what hospitality is. It's like I'm taking responsibility for you. Okay, as your guest, you are not taking particular responsibility for the host. The host is taking responsibility for his guests. So when I welcome you in and I take responsibility, if something goes wrong with your stuff, I am implicitly, that's what it means to be a host. I'm accepting that responsibility. If your stuff leads to something of mine being damaged, which you otherwise wouldn't be liable for, your role as a guest is not to accept liability for anything that might go wrong because you're a guest in my house. Okay, so that's basically the difference. I could say, what do you mean? You're the one getting something. You're the one that's being that's getting this. You're getting something. You owe the person something, but that's not the way it works. When you welcome somebody in as the host, you're sort of accepting, the role of the host is sort of being responsible for the guests and not the reverse. Yes.
Intuitively, it seems like there are different scenarios in which some lean more towards being a guest and some lean more towards being like a traveling salesman. Like if I allow a salesman to come into my house and he brings all his
that's an interesting point.
I'm not really
right.
But if I invite you to come to my home, for
the difference between like hospitality, right, tolerating somebody and hospitality. It's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. So anyway, that's what the Gemara is going to get to. Let's see the Gemara. Okay, so Besu Rabbi Omer more. You would have no liability until you explicitly accept liability. Reisha v'seif for Rabbi, so the beginning and the end, whether there's no implicit liability is Rabbi. The mitzias or rabbanan in the middle, where there is liability when things happen to my guests, that's the rabbis. I mean, you got to be consistent. So the Gemara says, Arab Zayra Tava, split it, Nisha Shanazo Lo Shanazo, which is never a satisfying answer. You're right, different positions are floating around. Rav Amina, Kula Rabbanan. Except till you get to the last line, it's all the rabbis. Meaning, Rabbi says you never accept responsibilities. The rabbi says you do implicitly accept responsibility. But it depends who. Okay, Ubershut. Okay, Shmirat Kederot Kibo Allah Bachatzer. When I give permission, I am accepting implicitly the responsibility for the pots. Even if I had nothing to do with it, right? It's like homeowners, like that isn't what homeowners insurance is about. Well, you want to protect also your property from loss, but it's also if some guest on your property gets hurt, you can be sued, right? So when I have somebody on my property and they're here with permission, I am implicitly accepting liability if anything goes wrong, even if some accident occurs, even if it wasn't my cow that ate the fruit, even if some wind blew over the pots. Once you're a guest in my house, I'm implicitly accepting responsibility for things that happen to you, and it is not the reverse. You as a guest are not responsible for things that happen to me. I am the host and responsible for things that happen to you as the guest. Okay, but I do accept those points that like it's not always about hospitality. Okay, now the Gemara continues. Hichnis peirosav, but now we understand that a guiding principle here is the reason your chayv is not shein and regel, it's not reshut hanizach. The reason your chayv is implicit accepting of responsibility. Hichnis peiros of l'chotzer balabayis. Now you brought in your fruit, okay, and it basically says if you got a chalob reshut and the animal slipped and got damaged or whatever, you're liable. That's a case of like a boar, okay. But presumably, if it's reshut, you would be exempt. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this: Amarav, lo shanu. When are you liable if you put the fruit down there and the animal slipped and got damaged and you didn't have permission? Elo shehuchla kabad. If the animal slipped on it. Aval achla, if the animal ate it, putter, and it got sick, you're exempt. So here's an interesting question, right? Let's do an even easier scenario. A bor b'reshut harabim. I put my fruit down in the middle of the street, okay, in the reshut harabim, an animal slips, I'm chayiv. That's a bor b'reshut harabim. Let's say an animal eats it and got sick. Am I chayiv or not? Okay, so it's not a classic bor, right? A classic bor is it's just like it's something that happens to the victim because when the victim is not sort of like accidentally engages in the thing. Here, the victim, the cow, sees it and consciously eats it, and it got sick, but it wouldn't have gotten sick if I hadn't put it there. Do we call that a bore, or do we say that's like grama b'nezik in pater? A bore is when the victim trips over it, slips on it. When the victim actively sees it and consciously chooses to eat it, so I might be to blame, but only in a very indirect sense, and it's a grama, it's not bore, right? So that's what basically is being said here. In that case, you're pater. My time, it shouldn't have eaten. Now, what does it shouldn't have eaten might mean? It should have eaten might have mean is I couldn't have anticipated that it would do it, which is very funny. Why shouldn't you anticipate that an animal will eat fruit? So if you take a look at Tosfos, Tosfos says, Tosfos says, that it's like something unlikely that the animal would eat fruit, which is bizarre. Why would that be unlikely? Maybe it's unlikely it would eat so much that it would give itself a stomach ache. But Tosfos says, no, that's not true. Okay, because later on it makes it very clear that it was a likely thing. So I'm just skipping to the end of Tosfos after the parentheses. Ella says Tosfos, here's the reason you're exempt. The animal is knowingly consuming the fruit, which is damaging it. It's participating in its own damage to itself. Okay, you can't make me responsible. It's sort of like a pshir hanizak. Okay, if you're actually engaging in the thing itself and bringing it upon the animal, bringing it upon yourself, it's not like I am the mazik. Now, of course, there's a question like, animals are not so intelligent, and how much is it? It's blame. But nevertheless, it's an interesting question. Like the way I would frame it, those makes it sound like a more general principle. You can never hold me liable to something that an animal sort of consciously, did to itself. But I would just see that it's not a bore. A bore is something that happens through inattention and through accident, and not through some type of a conscious type of a thing. I'm trying to think about what would be another example where would it be a bore. Let's say it would be a question of, I don't know. Let's say it would be a question of H. Let's say, I have to get scared because animals tend to be afraid of fire, but okay. Let's say it would be a case that of the fire, and I knew that there was a certain animal, whatever. There's a reason to expect, and it was negligent, that certain animals out there play. Are there any animals that play with fire? Probably not. They're probably all afraid of it. I'm trying to think of some type of a thing. Anyway, the point is it's just a bore thing. If an animal actually did it to itself consciously, but I knew that was a likely occurrence of this type of a thing, right? Tells us it's not just technically, it's not a bore. It's that all of these avos nezikin are when there's the actor, and the perpetrator and the victim, the one that was perpetrated upon. But when the thing itself takes a part in its own injury, even if it is it could be expected and the animal is not really, hyper intelligent, nevertheless, that is not the classic example of the avos nezikin. Okay, and even if I'm indirectly to blame, that's like grama b'nezikin and pater. All right, so that's what the Gemara says. Okay, I'm a Rav Sheshes. So says Rav Sheshes. Amina, I said, Kinoy v'shachiv Rav Amalash Maita. Rav must have been right. Rav must have been dozing off when he said this. Okay, why? To tell you, because it's clear that you are chayiv in that case. If you put poison in front of your friend's animal, you're exempt in court, but you're liable in heaven. Now, that could be a good example. You're not liable, even though you were to blame, because it did it to itself. But he says, but here's why he thinks that's a counterexample. Why are you exempt? Because it's poison, and normal animals will avoid poison. I guess it depends how obvious.
Let's say it was a poison apple.
I understand. Okay, the fruit, which is a natural thing. You should also be chayiv. Again, I want to know what type of a chayiv it is. Is it a boar? What is it? Anyway, but he thinks it's just because it's poison, the animal should have known better. But if it's fruit where the animal should have known better, you would be liable. Why don't you say it shouldn't have eaten? So you see, you don't say that. You are liable if the animal eats the fruit and gets injured. So I'm Rina. Who had in a filu peiros nami? You're also exempt by fruit. So patamidini adam. So why did it give the example of poison? I would say because poison is more deadly. You would think if you would tell me the two things, I would think you'd be more liable. Should be more liable by the poison case. Okay, so you're both. Even poison, which you shouldn't have eaten, you're still liable in heaven. There's still moral liability. Okay, but nevertheless, in both cases, you're putter because even in fruit, which it would more naturally eat, is basically you are not liable. Some of us could also be talking about a certain type of a grass which is actually poisonous, which it wouldn't actually eat. It doesn't know to avoid. Okay, so these could be cases where it actually doesn't know to avoid it, and you are putter at the end of the day, whether it did or didn't know to avoid it, because the animal did it to itself. Masri, we're not done. We still want to try to prove whether you're liable when an animal eats the fruit. A woman went to bring in her grain to grind in somebody else's mill house. Okay, and Tosfos says the chiddush here is that even though she's a customer and it might be a presumption you have a right to walk in. No, you got to get permission to go into the person's domain. Okay, so she goes in shelo b'rishus, and the homeowner's animal ate it. Putter, he's exempt because he was there shelo b'rishus. In Huska, if the animal was damaged with this wheat, chayeves, then she's liable. So now we're assuming the animal was damaged by eating the wheat. Yamai, why is she liable? Nema havile shelo tochal. The animal shouldn't have eaten. Army, you could say, why is it any better than our Mishnah? We said it slipped, so which is like a case of a boar, and that's why you're chayav. So here too, same case. Somebody says, so why did you what occurred to you? What actually made you think that this was a case of eating and not slipping? So the Gemara says, damaged by them. So it means somehow that it means it slipped on them. So ahu. Was damaged. Didn't say with them. It means that somehow it wasn't like an immediate slipping.
It's not like on it.
On it, right? It didn't slip on it. It wasn't immediately. So achlahu. So we think it means that it ate it. The other one says no, lo shna. It wouldn't matter. All right. So we're still arguing that if it ate it, you're not liable. It did it to itself. Toshma. You brought your ox into somebody else's domain without permission, and it ate grain, and he treats it like I think it means like it either exploded or maybe how does it translate? It like defecated or something, or like
was diarrhea.
Diarrhea, yeah, right. So basically, it had loose bowels and it whatever, and it died as a result of the diarrhea. Potter. The nichnis b'reshut, but if the owner gave permission, then then the owner is liable. Why are you liable? It shouldn't have eaten my wheat. So here there's an obvious answer. What do we just say? Why am I liable when I give you permission to bring your thing in? Because I accept general liability for anything that will happen. Okay, it's not because I'm a mazik in that case. That's because if I gave you permission to come in, I've accepted liability for everything. So the Gemara says, Amarava, you're asking from a case of permission about a case of without permission. When I give you permission, I've accepted liability for anything that happens to your animal when I welcome you in. Even if your ox just strangles itself, right? Anything. Now that's an interesting question, right? Let's say the animal drops dead out of a heart attack. Presumably not, okay? But presumably whatever happens, in a general sense, whatever happens here in the context of it being on my property, I accept liability. So even if it ate it and it couldn't have eaten it or whatever, and it did it to itself, it happened because it was on my property, I accept liability for that. So that's not an example. But if you don't have permission, right, then you are not, and my animal eats your stuff and you're here without permission, actually in that case, you are not liable. We don't say, and maybe this is also part of the chiddush, right? Maybe the Gemara actually thinks that, because I keep on saying, like, what would it be? Would it be a boar? What type of a boar is this? But maybe the Gemara thinks that maybe there's even a heightened liability when you're in my domain without permission than in all other scenarios. Like in a Rosh Hashanah, there's no question you'd be putter. It's not a boar. It ate your fruit. That's not a boar. But maybe when you come into my domain, you're violating of my space. It's maybe like the opposite of when I give you permission. The same way when I give you permission, I accept liability for everything. Maybe you're violating of my space means you're fully liable for any damage that comes as a result of you. Right? That's an interesting idea. Now, again, I don't know what category to put it in. You put that in Adam Mazik? I don't know, but you can understand that actually makes sense. You're not supposed to be here. As a result of your being here, I suffered some damage. I don't care if you can put it in shore, boar, or whatever. You violated my space, right? And therefore I suffered. Maybe that creates a general responsibility. So I don't know what category to put that in, but that would be interesting and possible. And maybe that's why the Gemara has to say, even that has limits. If it was something my animal did to itself, brought upon itself, then your liability doesn't extend that
Just
far.
because you didn't give her a shoot doesn't mean the person who's coming in is violating. I mean, maybe I'm just coming over to visit. I don't have.
Well, that's an interesting question, but do you have
permission.
implicit permission to walk up to my door and knock on my door, right? I mean,
I can't phone you. I mean,
well, I don't know, I mean, I don't know what the norms of the society
Maybe
were.
it's like,
But if people have permission, if when you want to visit, you implicitly, people have a right to come up and knock on my door, then that's not Shelo B'Reshus. Shelo B'Reshus is an assumption that you need to be welcomed in, or else the understanding within the society is that you don't have a right to come up to my front door, right? So maybe you do have a right.
Or you have a right, but you better be careful. until I give you permission
That's
to come in.
interesting. Is that Shelo B'Reshus, but you accept the liability of the Shelo B'Reshus? I don't know. But anyway, but I do wonder why the Gemara is thinking you would be chayiv here. Is it thinking you're chayiv because it's a type of a bore, or is it thinking that when you enter Shelo B'Reshus, you accept general responsibility for things that happen as a result? Okay, let's start the next piece. Ibarlu. Hecha the kibul olei nitirusa mahu. The nafshehu the kibul olei odima feeling to use of the alma kibul olei. You enter into my roshus, and I implicitly or explicitly accept responsibility for things that are going to happen to you. What if those things that happen to you? Now we already said if a chanak et atzmo, or a ruach she'eina mitzui, or a ruach came, or wind came, all those things I'm liable. But what if there's three categories? The things that my things does. My animal eats your fruit, eats your fruit, gores your animal. You're my guest. There are things that happen on its own. A wind blows your pots down. And then there's things that a third party causes. I welcome you into my domain, and then Michael's animal comes ahead and gores your animal in my yard. Am I responsible, or do we say no? Then you got to go to Michael. I'm sorry. That's him doing it. That's
not your yard, the gourd. It's my animal.
I understand, but do I say when I welcome you into my yard, I'm accepting all responsibilities? Okay, so or even other people. Tani Rabbi Yehuda Bar Simon, B'Nezikin de Bekarna, he taught a Breita in the like Nezikin when they in the Tanaitic material that they were learning about Nezikin of the Bekarna, this yeshiva there. Heichnis Peirosa V'Chatza Balabayis Shelo B'Reshut. You bring your fruit in without permission. And an ox came and ate it. So he, presumably the homeowner, is exempt. But if he gave you permission to come in, chayav. So we're going to assume that means the homeowner is liable. He is liable to reimburse you for the other guy's cow who ate your fruit. So the Gemara says, you see, he accepts general liability. Man patru man chayiv. Who's patru and who's chayiv? Lav patru b'chatza b'chayiv b'chatza. It sounds like we're talking about the homeowner. If he gave you permission to come, if he didn't give you permission, then you go to Reuven if Reuven's cow ate your fruit. But if he did give you permission, he is going to reimburse you, even though it was Reuven's cow that ate your fruit. Amri, no, that we might not be talking about the homeowner. Pater balashur v'chayiv balashur. We're talking about whether Reuven has to reimburse you. Okay, so if it's Reuven reimbursing you, what difference does it make if you have right to be in my yard or not? So balashur, if we're talking about Reuven, my b'reshus and my shelo b'reshusika, what difference does it make if you have rights to be in this guy's yard if it was Reuven's cow who ate the fruit? So the Gemara says, no, Amri B'Reshut, if the homeowner gave you permission to be there, so your fruit has a right to be there. And then Reuven's cow eats it, so then Havile Shein B'Reshut HaNizak. Reuven's cow is eating your fruit. Is eating your fruit in your domain. Remember, Shein is only Chayev, B'Reshut HaNizak. So if I gave you permission to have your fruit here, then it's like temporarily your domain. You have a right to have your fruit here. And when it gets eaten by Reuven's cow, he's eating your fruit in your domain because it's your borrowed domain. I let you be here. And he has to reimburse you. Shelo b'reshut, okay, v'shein b'reshut anizak chayavas. Shelo b'reshut, if you don't have rights to be here, havlei shein b'reshut harabim. Then he's eating your fruit, but your fruit's in a place where it's not your rights to be here. So it's like eating your fruit in Reshut Harabim, and therefore it's exempt. So your right to be or not will determine whether Reuven is chayav for eating your cow for eating your fruit. But we have not answered the question whether when I allow you to be here, am I accepting responsibility for damage that occurs by a third party? Okay, and we will continue to see that tomorrow. Jen, you had one question?
Right. So, I thought if you were saying it, you do have responsibility, and then I was going to ask if like I have to pay you for the damage, but then can I go to Ruvain and get the money back?
Yeah, so that would be possible, and Tosfos discusses that, but we have not resolved the question whether I accept liability for a third party. Right now, we're saying that we don't have any evidence that I do.
Right.
Okay, so we will continue.